Civic Center, Thursday, February 26th at 8 p.m. It's John's birthday.
This is WHO TV 13 Des Moines.
The Democratic Party offers a number of presidential candidates who can prove themselves capable of leading this nation. I will not add my name to that number.
Good morning. With that surprise announcement Thursday night, New York Governor Mario Cuomo took himself out of the 1988 presidential race. His statement surprised the experts who had become increasingly certain that the governor would make a run at the White House. Now that he's not, there are new strategies being plotted in the Democratic ranks today, Friday, February the 20th, 1987.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant, Gumbel, and Jane Pauley.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on this Friday morning, heading towards a February weekend. John Palmer is going to give us a little bit more on that surprising Cuomo decision from the news desk in just a moment, and catch us up on the rest of the day's events, too. And then following weather on Close Up at 7:09, we'll mark the 25th anniversary of the first American to orbit the Earth. We'll do so with the man who rode to fame aboard Friendship 7, Senator John Glenn.
And then we'll get into the wrong stuff as Mike Jensen reports on the widening Wall Street insider trading scandal. Jane Alexander will be here a little later, and we'll talk with the newest member of the Tennis Hall of Fame. Surprise, surprise, Billie Jean King.
We will also this morning put some attention on U.S.-Soviet relations, specifically how they're being influenced by the emergence of Mikhail Gorbachev. Let's move to the news desk now, and John Palmer. Good morning, John.
Brian, Jane, good morning. Reaction to New York Governor Cuomo's decision not to run for president in 1988 is one of great surprise, with some political leaders saying they are stunned and flabbergasted. His forum for the announcement, a radio call-in talk show, was almost as surprising as what he had to say.
In my opinion, the Democratic Party offers a number of presidential candidates who can prove themselves capable of leading this nation toward a more sane, a more progressive, and a more humane future. I will not add my name to that number. I will not be a candidate. I'm very, very grateful to a lot of people who suggested that I might adequately serve as a candidate myself, but the decision I've made, I think, is best for my state, best for my family, and I think also best for my party.
NBC's chief political correspondent, Ken Bode, is in Chicago this morning, and he has more on this surprising decision by the New York governor. Ken, good morning.
Morning, John. This is a big lineup change in the Democratic field. Mario Cuomo was considered like the Reggie Jackson of the field. You knew that if he came to the plate, anything could happen. It could be a home run, it could be a strikeout. You didn't know what it was going to be, but from the joy in the other camps last night, I think they feared a home run. Cuomo's decision affects everybody. The favorite hiding place in the Democratic Party is gone. People who weren't ready to make up their minds yet could say they were waiting for Cuomo. That excuse isn't available anymore, and so everyone is somewhat affected. Gary Hart is obviously affected among the most because he's now the honest-to-God, undisputed front-runner in the Democratic Party, and Hart will get some of the money that normally goes to the front-runner, but he's also got to stand up there and take the flack that goes to the front-runner. Among the others most affected would be Governor Michael Dukakis of Massachusetts and Senator Joe Biden of Delaware, both of whom must be a little closer to a decision on whether to run this morning. Dukakis has said that he wouldn't make up his mind based on what Cuomo did, but now there's no longer another successful Northeastern governor in the race, and so the field's a little clearer for him. It's also a little clearer for all the longer shots, the Jesse Jacksons, the Bruce Babbitts, the Dick Gephardts. They've got another obstacle out of their way. Hart is in first place, but as we all know, when the Democratic primaries and caucuses begin, there's going to be a second place. And John, the Democratic field is even more wide open today for the presidential nomination in '88 than it was yesterday.
Ken, why did he do it? Any thoughts on why Cuomo decided to take himself out?
Well, John, the forces were gathering behind Cuomo. The people pushing him to run, suggesting he was going to run. He had a schedule that looked as if he was finally beginning to get around outside New York State and take a look at some national issues, take a look at this country. Mario Cuomo is a deeply introspective man. We know that from his diaries. We know that once before he was pushed into a race that he didn't feel like he was ready to make. That was mayor of New York, and he was beaten in that race. It had a big effect on him. And it seems to me pretty clear that Mario Cuomo was not ready to run this time, felt he wasn't ready to run, and was not going to be pushed into it.
Thank you, Ken, for that report. In other news, the Wall Street Journal reports this morning that early last year, President Reagan authorized the CIA to kidnap suspected terrorists overseas and bring them to this country to stand trial. The idea of the kidnapping, described as a snatch, grab, and deliver operation, was, according to officials quoted by the newspaper, the idea of Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and former CIA Director William Casey. Meantime, there have been other disclosures concerning the Iran-Contra affair. Here's White House correspondent Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, good morning.
Good morning, John. Well, the latest testimony to the Tower Board only adds to the growing impression among many Reagan supporters that the president has not been properly served by his staff. Robert McFarlane, the former National Security Advisor, recovering from a suicide attempt, was in his hospital room but testified to the Tower Board yesterday and again contradicted Chief of Staff Donald Regan on whether the president had approved the Iran arms sales in advance before Israel delivered those arms. Now, that added to the fact that Republicans on Capitol Hill are very upset. The president changed his story to the Tower Board on that crucial point after having been persuaded to do an about-face by Donald Regan. That, according to longtime Reagan friends, hurts the credibility of both the president and Regan. Then there's another embarrassment. It's been learned that the new communications chief, John Kohler, was briefly a member of a Hitler Youth organization in his youth as a child in Germany. The White House was surprised by that. People here are holding their breath, saying that in the current climate, if there is a lot of heat about that fact, they will have to drop Kohler. And there is also the NBC report that Donald Regan hung up the phone twice on First Lady Nancy Reagan. That leading people here this morning, Reagan staff members, to tell me for the first time that they think that their boss cannot survive the current pressure for him to quit. John?
All right, thank you, Andrea. Perhaps you've read about it, perhaps you've heard about it. The state of California has committed $750,000 to establish a task force to promote self-esteem. Reed Galen has our report.
Relax, become calm, a secure, positive feeling.
These Californians are searching, in their own way, for the key to a happy, productive life. Call it
Confidence, self-assurance, self-esteem.
With it, you might feel you could conquer the world. Without it, you just might try.
We see major epidemics in California of violence and crime, one of drug abuse and child abuse. And begins to look like self-esteem is most likely the vaccine.
State Assemblyman John Vasconcellos overcame the snickers about his warm, fuzzy approach to government and convinced the state legislature to create the California Task Force to promote self-esteem.
And so that people grow up without having to pick on a chemical or pick on somebody else to make themselves feel better or feel whole.
In newspapers across the nation, the comic strip Doonesbury has been having a good time with this.
If we can't laugh at ourselves in the process of doing this, we'd be victims of low self-esteem ourselves.
Even taxpayers working to improve their own self-esteem don't all necessarily agree the state should commit $750,000 to study and figure out how to promote it. But in California,
this is known as the Age of Enlightenment, and I think that's what people are doing now.
No less an authority than Doonesbury agrees.
I want you to feel a very strong and positive inner feeling.
Reed Galen, NBC News, Sacramento.
No problems with self-esteem around here. Here's Brian Gumbel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer. Appreciate it. Well, it's God, unusual as it may sound to you, has this Friday off. Joe Witte has extended his morning from sunrise to join us. How are you?
Good morning. Very good, Brian. You've got to be happy as a lark. Baseball season is starting.
Isn't that terrific?
Hey, wonderful.
Isn't that terrific?
Oh, hey. Cubbies are in, what, Arizona?
Yep.
And weather's not too bad there.
Pitchers and catchers have reported.
Yeah, but however, east of there, it is snowball season. If you're traveling Route 40 today, watch out for a snowy situation. Snowfall there, 4 to 6 inches. Oklahoma City, maybe about 1 to 3. And you can see which direction it's going to move. That circle of clouds moving along with the jet stream, headed for you folks in Tennessee and Virginia for the first part of the weekend. I know you're buried already, trying to dig out, but there's more on your way. Not today. Again, the big story, winter advisories from Colorado, New Mexico, parts of North Texas, Oklahoma, parts of Missouri later on today, and even Arkansas as this snow situation passes and moves to the East Coast. To the West Coast, not a bad day. A little windy, however, in California, especially the mountain country. And later on today and tonight, look for some rain moving into the Pacific Northwest. Seattle's high, 49 degrees. In the east, a beautiful day, and I want to say happy 65th anniversary to the NBC, one of the original 9 NBC radio stations, WGY at Schenectady, New York. That's the national weather. Now here's what's happening in your part of the world.
Good morning, everyone. Considerable cloudiness this morning, partly sunny this afternoon, and you can look for a high in the mid-40s.
And coming up in the next half hour, a look at what the Saturday weather is going to be for your weekend. And now, here's Jane.
Thank you, Joe. On Close Up this morning, a most important anniversary. February 20, 1962, 25 years ago today. America sat glued to our television set, says Marine Lieutenant Colonel John Herschel Glenn, Jr. Became the first American astronaut to orbit the Earth.
Godspeed, John Glenn. 5, 4, 3.
Senator Glenn joins us in Washington and watching these historic pictures this morning. And Senator, does your pulse quicken maybe a little bit to relive it like this?
Sure does, Jane. It's hard to believe that was 25 years ago. In fact, I failed in one mission this morning in that I was going to get a picture of you 25 years ago doing the twist in Indianapolis and play it here to show people just exactly how long ago it's been.
Oh, well, America is so sorry that you were not able to do that. Senator, weren't you just even a little bit scared at that moment?
Sure, apprehensive, I guess would be the word. We were involved in something involving power and speed. You know, when you're in orbit, you're traveling almost 5 miles a second, which is hard to comprehend, 17,500 miles an hour, dealing with speed and complexity and reentry heat and things that were very much uncertain. And so, sure, you were apprehensive, but not as far as fear goes, fear that would overcome you and prevent you from doing what you were supposed to do. No, we'd trained a lot to avoid exactly that.
You were going to make the history books either way. Did you bother to make any contingency plans for maybe not coming back?
Well, you thought about that, of course, and I even talked to my family. My kids were teenagers. Our daughter Lynn is with us here in the studio this morning, as a matter of fact, came in with me. She's here for our little celebration this evening with the other Mercury astronauts and some other people. And I talked to my family about what I would expect of them and how important this mission was for the country, I felt, what we're going to learn or hope to learn. We're opening a whole new service for our country, and we wanted to get ourselves back. The national psyche was sort of at a low ebb at that time, and I felt an important thing to do, and I was willing to take those risks, and I wanted my family to share in the reasons for all that. So we talked about the possibility of not coming back, yes.
4 hours and 55 minutes around the world trip, that first one. What did you do up there in that time?
Well, we had a lot of things to be done. There were a number of research things on board at that time, but my basic mission at that time was to find out what man's reaction to weightlessness was over an extended period of time. Some of the doctors had predicted that the eye would change shape, for instance, over an extended period of time in weightlessness, or that the fluids in the inner ear would float rather randomly, and you'd have such uncontrollable nausea that you wouldn't be able to do anything, which would mean that man's efforts in space were probably doomed to begin with, if that was the case.
Can I stop you there?
Sure.
Is it true that it sounds like there must have been some kind of a hypodermic shotgun in the capsule? How was that going to work in case you did become terribly
Well,
nauseous?
the latest motion sickness medicine at that time was called Tygan, and they had that in tablet form I could take, and also they had developed a syringe, a hypodermic needle that was spring-loaded, and if I took the catch off on that, I could jam that onto my leg, and it would inject the needle through the suit into my leg and inject the serum all at one time, which would be a sort of a get-me-down type thing if I was in an emergency and really had to re-enter and come down wherever just to get back down.
Well, I'm glad you didn't have to use that.
I can tell you this, we only practiced with that on a grapefruit down at the
Did you think, 25 years ago, did you think we'd be further along by now, by 1987?
No, I think things have gone pretty much as I thought they would go. We talked, of course, we were planning Project Apollo that time, landings on the moon, which came off very successfully, of course, and ahead of schedule. Then there was going to be the shuttle, and the reason it was called the shuttle was because it was going to shuttle people and equipment back and forth to a permanently orbiting space station. And then, of course, long-range plans, our planetary flight on down the road someplace. So I felt we were on schedule. I think that we went triumph after triumph after triumph, Jane, for so many years, and then we were fallible. And we had the tragedy that paid for all of those triumphs. And now what we're involved in is coming back again to redo the people, the procedures, prove out the hardware again, and get going, because the purpose of the program is not just to put a person up in, or persons up in space and keep them alive and see if you can get them back. That would be more of a stunt and a continuing series of stunts. It's basic fundamental research. We're going in this new laboratory of space, and that the American questing spirit that we've had, the wanting to go into the laboratories or do geographical exploration or now out into space, we learn the new things first in this country. We put it to work in business and industry, jobs, employment. That's been one of the hallmarks of why this nation has gone ahead in competition with other nations around this world. We find ourselves in increasing competition now, and this kind of research is even more important now than it's been in the past, I think.
Senator Glenn, you've given this some thought in 25 years. A happy anniversary to you and, well, to all of us, because we do share.
We shared it with everybody back then. We do now, and everybody's invited back for the golden anniversary 25 years from now, too.
All right, we'll be here.
And I'll have your picture that time.
Never mind that. We'll be back in a moment. First, this is Today on NBC.
Discover the difference in fine custom cabinetry. Discover Wood Mode.
Convenient.
Everything you need at your fingertips.
Efficiency.
Wasted space is a thing of the past.
Capacity.
Shop all you want. You've got the place for it.
Variety.
More storage ideas and convenience features than you can imagine.
From Wood Mode.
America's best-selling line of custom-built cabinetry.
Available exclusively from City Design. Call or stop in today.
An emergency sale message from World Radio.
Hello, I'm Juan Roque, General Manager of World Radio, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. Business is tough, sales are not great, and as a result, inventory is way too high. This is not a problem, this is an emergency, and I'm going to deal with it the best way I know, by cutting prices on every item in stock.
Buy this VHS video recorder with wireless remote, only $199.
We're serious about selling this inventory, so we're going to do whatever it takes. This sale will convince you that World Radio is the right store.
Ultima 2 introduces Pro-Collagen Anti-Aging Firming Foundation, a makeup with powerful treatment capacities. Its refined color system works in such perfect unison with your skin, it gives time a run for its money. Pro-Collagen Anti-Aging Firming Foundation, makeup assumes a new responsibility. Acquire Perfect Visions, a color collection and mirror from Ultima 2, now at Yonkers.
You probably remember your family doctor as a person everyone knew. Doc was more than a physician. He was a trusted friend. He took a special interest in you. Times have changed, but our family practice doctors still specialize in you, knowing you and your medical needs. For an appointment at one of our family practice clinics, where the doctors specialize in you, call 280-WELL, the University of Osteopathic Medicine and Health Sciences. We're here for your good health.
You'll recall that Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev met for the first time at Geneva in November of '85. There, the two men spent most of their time getting to know one another. They parted amiably. They met a second time in October of 1986 at Reykjavik, and that meeting ended in failure. Well, a new book, Reagan and Gorbachev, explains what really went on at those two meetings. It was co-authored by Strobe Talbott, expert on U.S.-Soviet negotiations, and the Washington bureau chief for Time magazine, who joins us this morning from our Washington newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Bryant.
In the long run, whose ends were best served by those two summits, Mr. Reagan or Mr. Gorbachev?
I don't think there's any question that President Reagan came out ahead of the Geneva summit back in 1985. And the Reykjavik summit, which was very much the brainstorm of Mr. Gorbachev, went his way a year later. In some ways, the Reykjavik summit was Gorbachev's revenge against Reagan for the Geneva summit the year before.
That was on a government-to-government basis. On a person-to-person basis, can either man said to have bested the other at either place?
Well, once again, I think Reagan has to be seen as the winner, if you want to look at it that way, in Geneva. After all, he got the leader of the other superpower to come to the summit very much on Reagan's own terms. The principal criterion on which President Reagan was judged, and particularly by his right-wing supporters, was his ability not to give an inch on the issue of Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative. But then a year later, at Reykjavik, it was really Gorbachev who came out ahead. He made what he hoped President Reagan would see as an offer that the president couldn't refuse. The president did refuse the offer, and as a result, Gorbachev was able to get a lot of propaganda credit around the world.
Yeah, you label in the book Reykjavik a complete shambles, a mess. Why?
Well, it was a kind of a textbook case in how superpowers ought not to negotiate with each other. It was very much an improvised, last-minute summit meeting. President Reagan and his top advisors went into it very poorly prepared. They really didn't know what to expect. It was kind of a classic bait-and-switch scam pulled on them by the Soviets. But I wouldn't want to leave the impression that it was completely without value. amidst the wreckage of the Reykjavik summit, there were some hopeful signs. There was quite a bit of progress made on some extremely difficult and important arms control issues. And if there is to be a deal between Reagan and Gorbachev before President Reagan leaves office, the outlines of that deal, I think, were apparent at Reykjavik.
You're a man who sounds like a third meeting is still possible.
It's possible, but as time goes on, it's harder and harder to see it coming about. It's a curious situation, Bryant, because on the one hand, pretty much everybody knows what the deal would consist of that would bring Reagan and Gorbachev together for a very successful summit. It would essentially be a trade-off between some restrictions on Star Wars and some fairly deep reductions in the most threatening Soviet weapons. But a couple of things could stand in the way. One is disarray within President Reagan's own cabinet. There are absolutely irreconcilable differences between Secretary of State Shultz and Secretary of Defense Weinberger, and the President shows neither the ability nor the willingness to reconcile those differences. And also the clock is ticking. And in another 6-9 months, we're going to be in the midst of our presidential election silly season here, when any kind of foreign policy is almost impossible.
You end your book by projecting that U.S. and Soviet leaders will be talking about these arms issues into the next century. That's kind of a pessimistic outlook. Do you say that because the differences are insoluble or because there's an absence of political will? Why?
I'm sorry to hear you say that, Brian. I thought it was perhaps one of the few optimistic notes in the book. I mean, you know, it's the old line, Churchill's, better to jaw than war. I would hope that the leaders of these two powers, with all of the hostility between them, would continue talking about these issues. In fact, I think in some ways it's absolutely inevitable and inescapable that they do so. Now, what we have to hope is that along the way, all of the talk does produce some meaningful and stabilizing agreements.
Maybe we mean the same. You're talking about, I was talking about arguing about. I think it's the same wavelength.
Right.
Strobe, Talbott, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. 7:22, we're back in a moment. This is Today on NBC.
This music can mean just one thing. The Harlem Globetrotters are coming to Des Moines Monday, February 23rd. Don't miss your one chance this year to witness the madcap antics of the Harlem Globetrotters. Be at Betts Auditorium Monday, February